Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. Good work deserves good pay, how to fund fair compensation and prevent nonprofit burnout. We just heard from Alicia Keys serenading us about Girls on Fire. All the nonprofits in the world can't do their work with fire under their butts if they aren't being paid fairly. And this is what this session is about. We're so happy you're all here with us. We hope you're having a wonderful time at We Give Summit. I'm Isis with the Philanthropy Together team. Just a reminder that live transcripts have been enabled in closed captioning, so check that out if you need it. And otherwise, I'm so thrilled to introduce Jamila and Betsy, who will share more about our topic today. We actually met Jamila at Philanthropy Together from our Launchpad program. She was looking to start a giving circle, and we've been so happy to have her in the family ever since. So Jamila, take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, Isis. I really appreciate you and Philanthropy Together. So welcome again, everyone, to Good Work Deserves Good Pay, How to Fund Fair Compensation and Prevent Nonprofit Burnout. I am Jamila Jabulani with Class Action, and I want to also allow Betsy to introduce herself. You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm Betsy Leondar-Wright from Class Action.
Great. All right, so we're going to just jump right in. So we know that funder practices can often lead to burnout jobs. And we want to invite all of you guys into this just now emerging conversation that we want you to have with your members and also your grantees. So Staffing the Mission project is something of Class Action. It's a project of Class Action. And what they decided to do was to conduct a survey of nonprofits. So they had a few questions in mind. The first was, how satisfied are nonprofit employees with wages, benefits, and wage setting practices? How do they perceive the fairness, equity, and transparency of these practices? What high road practices help overcome obstacles to higher, fairer, and more equitable wages and benefits? So the survey sampled 82 respondents in a variety of different roles. The entire US was covered, but it was disproportionately Northeast. Class Action is based in Massachusetts. The survey method was convenient sampling, and then there was also oversampling of progressive and smaller nonprofits. So what did the survey discover? The findings were that there was widespread dissatisfaction, right? So with pay and with transparency. With pay, only 47% rated their organization's wage standards fair or very fair, and only 41% rated wage setting practices fair or very fair. And in thinking about transparency, only 37% rated wage transparency fair or very fair. Now, Staffing the Mission study mirrored other studies that have been happening in the field. We understand there's inadequate pay and benefits. It's important for you guys to know that 1/3 of the nonprofit workforce may be considered working poor. 70% of social justice nonprofits do not provide any benefits to staff. There's a huge gap when it comes to gender and race. And also unpaid overtime is extremely prevalent in the sector, in the nonprofit sector. We do want to highlight one particular organization that gave a little bit more information about some of the problematic practices that some of you may have encountered. I personally have as well, having worked for a number of nonprofits. But this person complained that they had zero health benefits. They weren't reimbursed for mileage. They were hired as contractors and perhaps not as an employee. The pay was just over public benefits limits, and then it was unclear communication regarding pay setting. So of course that led to mistrust and bitterness. Now, we also want to highlight that burnout jobs are a racial injustice. Low paid nonprofit jobs are definitely disproportionately held by women of color. If you look at some of the salaries and positions on the screen, these are lower wages. So if you live in Boston or you live in Los Angeles or San Francisco, these aren't living wages. You cannot survive with $40,000 position or $48,000 position in some of those larger areas.
So why are there so many terrible nonprofit jobs? And we see three reasons that we want to go through today. One is this sense that you should be happy to sacrifice for the cause because the mission is so important. So this myth that you should be a martyr to the cause and it's sort of like volunteer work. This is completely unrealistic given that this is people that need to support families, have expenses to pay. And we need to get rid of this nonprofit inferiority complex and just lose the martyr model. The other reason is that most nonprofit employers, we found in the survey, they use prevailing wages as their benchmark for what to pay by asking around what do other people pay, which is, it's a good practice in case maybe you're way below everyone else. But not only is this the most commonly used method, the people who use it think that it's fair to pay prevailing wages. And maybe if you're hiring a lawyer, it is fair, but think about the jobs that are mostly done by women and people of color. There are decades of discrimination baked into the prevailing wages for those kinds of positions, for human services and administrative work. This is a misperception that going along with what everyone else is paying should be seen as justice. You have to always check the local living wage to see what no one should go below the local cost of living. But the third reason why we think there's so many low quality nonprofit jobs is the one that we're going to focus on today, given that we're at the We Give conference summit. So funder practices. Until donors and foundations change their ways, some nonprofits will have no choice but to mistreat their staff. This has been called the nonprofit starvation cycle, where nonprofits are actually rated and graded by how little they can spend on overhead. And this overhead aversion has been shown by research to push down staff compensation because there's no source of funding to pay for your administration and development staff. So we got this amazing story from one of our advisory council members of staffing the mission. Lisa Rangel at that point was working for the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy. And she told us about this time that she worked on the staff of a foundation, and one of the organizations they gave to was the Prison Birth Project, this wonderful organization. And she admired it. So she left that job. She joined the board of the Prison Birth Project. And at that point, as a board member, she realized that the three part-time staff, the founding women, were so overworked, so underpaid, doing full-time work to the cost of their own health and families for part-time pay, that they folded. They laid down the whole organization. They couldn't do it anymore. And she had not seen the staff burnout in progress of this really severely bad situation. When she was a funder, it was invisible to her. So, and she attributes this to her own class and race privilege. She thinks there's just an inherent racism, classism, and sexism in this situation of the view from the funder's chair. And unfortunately, this kind of situation, this kind of story is not rare at all. And we think it applies to giving circles as well as big foundations.
So we wanted to take a quick step back, and thanks to Philanthropy Together and the whatisagivingcircle.com, we wanted to share this graphic with you guys because we know some folks are already a part of a Giving Circle. Maybe you've been a longtime member. I am a new Giving Circle founder, and I know there are some of you who are interested in starting Giving Circle. So this is kind of your first exposure, but we do want to reiterate that it is about collective giving, collective action. And one of the things that we did as a Giving Circle, it was really this, we followed this model. We gathered a group of family for in particular my Giving Circle, and we had an opportunity to have a meeting and discuss the vision and the values, what motivated us to give. We decided on integrated voter engagement and people with disabilities. And then we decided to pool our funds, and we determined a grantee. And thanks to Philanthropy Together, again, they provided me with a list of organizations that we were able to kind of sort through and determine, well, which group would best benefit from our small grant, right? Of course, we gave our donation, and now we're awaiting opportunities to go ahead and engage with the organization by sharing our time and our talent through our volunteer efforts.
So we want to ask you, rather than just telling you, we want to ask you all, what would it look like if Giving Circles took some accountability for grantee staff satisfaction? So we have 2 exercises for you. The first one we'll do in the whole group. We've written a mock bad letter from a Giving Circle to a grantee organization, and you can pick out what they did wrong. And the second one will go into breakout groups for a case study. So let's start with case number 1, what's wrong with this letter?
And so we would love to have someone read this hilarious letter. I'm sure that you would find a lot of problems with this particular letter. So if we have a volunteer, please feel free to virtually raise your hand and take yourself off of mute. We would love to have someone read our first exercise. Do you have any volunteers? If not, I will go ahead and take a stab at it. Okay, so let me go ahead. Oh, I thought I saw it. Oh, okay, go ahead, Isis, go for it. Thank you.
Do a little acting here. Dear Executive Director of a grassroots justice nonprofit, we are so pleased to announce that we, the Cayuga Springs Progressive Giving Circle, have decided to make you our biggest recipient of 2022, giving you a whopping $4,323 of our pooled money. The reason we chose your organization is for the wonderful environmental justice victory you achieved last year. But we would like to restrict our award to your next environmental campaign, whenever that happens, as most of our largest donors are panicking about climate disaster in their fancy houses. I'm editorializing here. Only the members who give $500 or more get to vote, and they voted for you. Our funds should only be used for weatherization materials. To get the money, please set up a wire transfer with your bank. Attached is the 4-page form required by this bank. They don't use online banking, so please fax the form to them. Here's the number. After signing it yourself and then getting our signatories on your signed copy, then mail us a receipt after the money is in your account. And once you've spent the money, please write us a report on how you spent it. And make sure that report is exactly 498 words. And what the impact on the community was with the itemized receipts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isis. So let's hear from the group. Yes, thank you, Sarah. Oh my God, it's right. No thanks. I hear you, Kelsey. You would think it was a scam. Any other thoughts about this letter? What else is wrong with it before we move on to the second part? Because we're not done yet.
Everything is wrong with this letter. I mean, this Giving Circle is a group of people that suddenly they think that they need to act like a big, old, patronizing foundation. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you, Sarah.
People can also type it in the chat if you have comments on what's wrong. You can also type in the chat.
And Colleen agreed with you, Sarah. Everything is wrong. Kelsey said they're so entitled. Taisha, this is stressful. We agree. Oh, and I'm trying to think of anything they're doing right. Yes, Colleen. And the tone. Yes, it is transactional. Mm-hmm. They do make you do a lot instead of making it easy for you. And that's not the point of a Giving Circle, right? That's not what we're trying to do here. All right, thanks, guys. So we'll move on to the second half of this letter, the end.
Maybe, Isis, you really are good at hamming it up.
You were excellent.
I nominate Isis to read the second half of the letter, too.
You want me to read this one, too? Okay. You will be happy to know that besides giving grants, we also give our time. 7 of us will come to your office on July 3rd, ready to volunteer. Please, though, set up a briefing by your staff. You all need to wear a certain kind of clothing. And for that morning, on your organizational history, community problems, past victories and defeats, and current program areas. And then put us to work for the whole afternoon, but don't make it too difficult. It would be wonderful if we could work directly with some diverse community members affected by the problems you work on. And for your information, it was all the photos of poor people of color being poisoned by toxins on your website that led us to choose grassroots justice. It will be a wonderful personal growth opportunity for us as suburban homeowners to learn from you and work shoulder to shoulder with the disadvantaged, your allies in the struggle. Marv and Mabel Snottle from the Cayuga Springs Progressive Giving Circle.
So what else is this imaginary giving circle doing wrong? We get some unmutes and verbal ones or in the chat.
I just can't with the please set up a briefing by your staff. Like I just, as a former campaign worker and current nonprofit worker, just the idea of 7 volunteers coming in and expecting a briefing, yeah, I can't.
I hate to say it, but some of these are taken from our own experience. I've had donors want that. Anything else?
And the photo comment too. I've seen that play out before, working at a girls empowerment program, and it was like some of the donors were just really awful.
Sarah says the language, words, horrible. Lisa says so entitled. Maggie says telling you when they will come and what you must do for them. That's a huge issue. Colleen says give our time. It's code for we know more than you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's excellent. Sarah said it's like we have 200 volunteers that want to paint a wall in your nonprofit next Friday. Thank you, Alexandra.
Did anybody notice the date that they announced they're showing up? It's the day before the holiday.
Yeah.
All right. So clearly you all knew what to spot. So we're going to go over a few things, ways that you can go through those steps of giving circles and be sensitized to the impact on the staff of the potential grantee and how you can support class and race equity within the beneficiary organizations, or what you could do wrong. Obviously, we exaggerated for effect what you can do wrong, but how to be more tuned in to what will be helpful. So at the gather stage, think about your own diversity in race, class, and income. And obviously, unlike that bad giving circle, honor donations of all sizes and give equal voice to the people who can give less. Then at the discuss stage, I'm sure you already talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in choosing the cause, the mission, and the impact of the organization, but also look at the impact of your gift on the nonprofit workers. And then this is sort of at stage 3 of deciding, there's 2 things you can do. One is to support a staff-friendly group, an organization that does do as best as it can to make the hours and the pay and benefits and working conditions good for the staff. But of course, some nonprofits literally can't afford to do that. So another thing you could decide is to help a wonderful but struggling organization improve the compensation that they pay. Then, of course, make receiving your donation as hassle-free as possible for them. Do not have complex reporting procedures or transfer procedures, as we exaggerated there. Just have the money just arrive for them. And then engage, as Jamila was describing, publicize the organizations and their work, and give your time for sure, but flex to their needs. And one simple way to do this, to not be a burden on that staff, is to go to their website and click on the tab that says like take action or something like that, how to get involved. Almost all nonprofits have a tab like that, and just take the actions that they want their supporters to do, which sometimes is publicizing something or advocating for something. And you can contact them and ask when might you want some volunteer labor, but make that very easy for them. So that's kind of our overall suggestions. We'll give some more detailed. Oh yeah, Isis here. Should I go back?
I just have a question, because we were talking about in that letter not wanting to restrict the funding to one certain thing. What do you all suggest about not restricting, but suggesting that the organization uses that $4,000 to more equally pay their staff, or take a sabbatical for the CEO? Like, what are your thoughts on restrictions in the positive?
It's a balance, of course. I would say that giving only for administrative or development staff, or only for health benefits, mostly we're against restricted funds and say it should all be, general operating grants. But I think that's an exception because they can't get money for that any other way. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, please use this for your overhead, or please use this to make life better for the staff in a flexible way. Jamila, do you have something to add to that?
I will. We are going to get to our recommendations shortly, so I'll say more about that once we get there. But that's a great question. Thanks, Isis.
Yeah. Okay. So now we've created a little scenario where in your small group, you're going to pretend to be members of this certain giving circle. We've written out these paragraphs about what's going on for them. So what we want you to do now, I think that Mike is going to put, or someone's going to put these links in the chat. If you could open one of these two links and have the document in front of you. If you have a Google app open, like Gmail, then the first one will work for you. If you're a Mac user, the one in iCloud will work for you. I hope everybody will be able to open one. So what we want you to do is to have that document with this scenario and discussion questions in front of you. And you're going to be in a very small group of 3 or 4, and introduce yourselves, read these paragraphs out loud, and discuss the discussion questions. What would, if you were in this imaginary giving circle, what would you do? And think about how the ideas you have might apply to your own giving circle if you have one. And that's some of what we'll ask for report backs when we come back. You'll have about 10 minutes in the breakout groups. Any questions about that? Or welcome back. And let's hear from a few people about what ideas you came up with. First, how would this imaginary giving circle find out the possible organizations that would have better or worse practices, better or worse jobs? And then what might they do differently next year? So you can either write in the chat, and Jamila will be able to say some of what is said in the chat, or you can raise your virtual hand and we can call on you. So Taisha, why don't you tell us?
Maggie, did you want to go first? No? Okay. Well,
okay, I didn't say, we didn't even get to what we could do about staff. We were trying to find racial justice, people working on racial justice and equity. So it's a long process, and we did briefly touch on it, and it's very difficult unless you collect some kind of data like 990s with with that kind of information about salaries and so forth, to really find out what staff is making and make some kind of judgment.
Yeah, 990s. It's a good idea. What else?
Okay, yeah, actually, Saturday, her comment is closely aligned to what our group discussed. So we said that similar things like talking to, leaning into our village, right? So our circles, our members, sometimes they, with us volunteering and serving on boards and working nonprofit, things like that, leaning into the circle itself for recommendations, talking to as a group about and being comfortable to have the uncomfortable conversations like this, but leaning into our networks first. And then Flavian and Melissa mentioned just the importance of like statistics, right? Of data. So like if you see that or hear about turnover within these organizations, that's kind of a red flag about there might be something there, something happening with them. Their employees are not happy. So that's a sign for us. And so just leaning into statistics and data also is super important as it relates, in addition to those that inward search within the circle itself and relationships.
Yeah, that's thanks, Ty. That 990 keeps popping up. From Sarah, she said, we discussed about how important it is to build relationships with the organization at all levels, not just the ED. So talk to clients, volunteers, staff at all levels. I think that's really important. And then Maria also says, really take a deep look at that 990. Is their total spending on salaries and benefits a reasonable number given the number of staff? And does their top executive salary eat up most of the salary that and benefits line? And 990s are available publicly. Anyone can access them. So it's an excellent resource.
I see Lisa.
Hi, yeah. We don't have that because I'm from Canada. So for places that don't, well, we have registered charities and we, they can give us tax receipts and that kind of stuff. We rely on them to tell us more information. But Shazine in our conversation made a really good point, as she's worked with other nonprofits, that you can ask how the nonprofits come up with their compensation policy. So if they don't even have a policy, that gives you some information. If they do, what is it? So we often ask directly, how many is full-time staff versus volunteers, but hadn't thought about asking about the tiers. And I thought that compensation policy part was really an excellent point.
That's good.
A couple more points in the chat. Kelsey said, they also talked about computer-based research, so 990s again, job listings, but also getting in the community and building those relationships. That's really critical. Sarah said a lot of small nonprofits are fiscally sponsored, so they don't have 990s. So that's a good point. So it's really, that's where it's important to build those relationships. And then Maggie shared about her group, and her case study was a church group. So she mentioned that it might be possible to go through faith-based networks to find those churches, and then nonprofits doing that racial equity work. Thanks, everyone. That's good feedback.
Yeah. Is there anyone who having this conversation made you think of something related to your own giving circle, if you have one? Is there something you would consider? How would you apply this? See, Sarah's got her hand up again. Yeah.
Yes, in our group, Colleen actually asked about also the importance of figuring out the culture of the nonprofit, right? And that how, in a given circle, because of the relationship that you create with the nonprofits, you are able also to kind of move the needle a little bit. And I was sharing that in the giving circles of the Latino Community Foundation, one of the criteria was to support a pipeline of Latino leaders, right? So we were not supporting organizations that the organizations had to have at least 51% of their board and their leadership staff Latino. So we really pushed the organizations to diversify their boards. We said, we want to give you a grant, and there are many of our giving circles that want to give money to you, but
you are serving Latinos and you have a board of 20 people and you have one Latino. So we need you to diversify your board. And we were able, you know, not 1 year to the next, but in a few years to really get those nonprofits to diversify their board and their leadership staff.
Good.
Any other takeaways, or should we move on? We have some recommendations. Yeah, Shazine.
I just, you know, when you do government grants, they have you list positions and pay, right? They're often the ones keeping the pay low, right? I'm currently working with a nonprofit, and they have quite a few. They have 400 employees, but they cannot keep their employees right now because they're literally competing with Target for pay. And, you know, they are about 98% government funded, right? And their pay is set by the government grants. They set the rates. And they're also competing with that same government, the county government, because they're taking their employees and paying them higher, but their grants are keeping their pay lower. So, you know what I mean? It's so complicated in how we can pay, right? Because part of it is sometimes set by grants. So yeah, this is a huge systemic issue, I think, in our field that we don't talk about enough. And we just don't have the, you know, we're at a point where now, because so many employees are leaving because they can get better pay elsewhere, it's causing, you know, an issue with services, right? And so, you know, things have to change. They're renegotiating some of their grants and things like that. But yeah, I think you brought up such a good, you know, point here. As a whole for compensation, but there's so many different factors. You know, yes, it's the nonprofits, it's also the grants that we're attached to. So thank you for having this conversation. I appreciate it.
And even though we are focusing on donors and foundations with staffing the mission, it's urgent for all of us to advocate with our state governments to raise the pay, raise the level of overhead that's allowed for human service grants and other contracts. I think in human services that state limits are one of the things keeping them as really, really bad jobs. All right, are we ready to move on, or any other thoughts?
Yeah, let's go ahead and move on. We're at 3:44.
Oh, great. Okay. So we have a few suggestions. We know a lot of giving circles don't have an application process, so it's just your own research. So you can find out some information, especially with bigger organizations, but as people were saying, even with little ones through the community relationships and networks. When you're considering giving to an organization in a certain area, the first thing you need to know is the cost of living for different family sizes in that area. So the MIT Living Wage Calculator is very easy and accurate, updated every year. That's sort of the most basic thing is all the pay above that cost of living for people who have to support a family. A lot of nonprofits do put some financial information on their website, maybe inside an annual report or a financial report. So look at the things they're making available. So is there a line item for health benefits, for example? And then people have already mentioned the 990s. You're supposed to put in your 5 highest paid staff, and not everybody does, but it should be there so that you can get some sense of that internal ratio. Does it seem like it's reasonable? And then besides the community networking, another way of doing informal, getting the scuttlebutt through informal channels is to go on Glassdoor and other job rating sites like that. Every employer might have a few complaints on Glassdoor, but if there's a big problem of terrible pay, terrible hours, terrible burnout conditions, that will show up on Glassdoor and other rating. We all look to peer reviews now, or what ratings do people who work there give.
So I learned that some of you actually have application processes. My giving circle does not, but some of you who are larger, it's interesting to hear about your applications. So we want you to consider a few things. First, make sure that your applicants and grantees know that you do support good pay for all staff and contractors and that you do support full benefits. So be loud and proud about it. And then we wonder, do you ask applicants to describe the full cost of their projects, including not just program staff, but also management and support staff pay and benefits? And then do you consider the internal wage ratio, living wages, benefits when you are determining the size of the grant award? Which ultimately also leads to a few more recommendations. And I think we've touched on most of this, but first of all, start the conversation with your Giving Circle members. Really bring this to light, maybe invite an expert in to share information, to kind of educate your members. Include those questions that I mentioned earlier about staff compensation on your application. Consider, if you're making smaller grants, funding salary increases or bonuses, or even give to support administrative staff. Thanks to Ty, who mentioned there are giving circles considering their time and talent and how they can best support staff shortages. So don't forget about giving your time. And of course, collaborate with other mission-aligned giving circles that can make for a larger award. And then finally, again, just update the language on your website, social media, and any other public platforms that you might be using that will help you, again, get the word out there and be loud and proud about it.
So yeah, our recommendations for being a staff-friendly giving circle are part of a bigger plan for the whole philanthropy sector. There's a thing in Britain called the Living Wage Friendly Funders, where it's like a certification, like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, or a LEED building, environmental building. And they've gotten hundreds of foundations and other funders to sign on to meet a series of benchmarks about how you can use your funding to create really good jobs. And they also support them. The organization supports nonprofits to enable them to give, say, health benefits and so forth. So it's literally thousands of nonprofits that have gotten more support to improve their job quality across the UK. So we're very inspired by them, and we think there should be something like that in the United States. So our goal for the coming years is to create some kind of an affinity group of funders against nonprofit burnout, or where you meet a set of benchmarks and you get a certain certification that you can show off, for funders whose grants create only decent jobs and who support their applicants and grantees to improve staff jobs. So we're looking for our kindred spirits who are on that wavelength. And we have a survey going, which that's the QR code there if you want to capture it on your phone. It's aimed around foundations. So we're not particularly looking for the practices of giving. We're looking for best and worst practices, but not particularly of giving circles. But if you're like really, really big, if you're connected to a giving circle that gives away $1 million or more, then I think then you do fall into the bailiwick of who we're asking survey questions of. So there's the tiny URL, Funders Against Nonprofit Burnout. If you do think, or if you're connected to a foundation also, we would love it if you would take this survey about foundation practices that affect nonprofit staff.
So we are slightly over time. We will just wrap with, here's our contact information. We love to hear from you about your best practices. If you're already working on this issue, if you have horror stories where something just went horribly wrong, let us know. If you have ideas about what funders can do to improve nonprofit job quality, reach out. And then I'll hand it over to Isis to close us out.
Thank you, Jamila. Thank you, Betsy. What a fun session. I feel like this 50 minutes flew by. And I was sharing earlier, but we talked so much about trust-based philanthropy, and this really adds another more concrete, specific lens on top of doing trust-based philanthropy work. So thank you both so much for sharing this with us. I know it's really helpful for everybody. Please stay on right now. A poll should be popping on your screen. We need data to know that these sessions are amazing, which I think we already all know, but would love for you all to give us feedback on the value and whether this topic helps you better understand before you scoot out. And then coming up in 8 minutes is our next session, Building Solidarity, Asian Americans with Black and Indigenous Lives. That's going to be a fantastic session. We hope you'll stick around for that one too. Thanks for being here at the WeGive Summit. Fill out this survey for us before you leave. Thanks, bye.